Welcome to Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with our storyteller today, Andrea Malish. She is a Ukrainian Canadian, and it's, of course, the story of the incarceration, the internment of Ukrainian Canadians in concentration camps in Canada during the First World War that we're talking about. Your family came to Canada when?
In 1903, they immigrated.
Now, the story of how Canada got all these Ukrainian immigrants is a story of really quite a glorious series of scams, isn't it? Who was the guy in Austria, really at the time, who arranged for all these Ukrainian immigrants?
It was a Ukrainian by the name of Dr. Olescu who approached the Canadian government and said, you need people and population to open up your West. I've got the people for you. Because there's such a great population in the Galician, the Bukovinan, and the Ruthenian areas
Those are
of Ukraine, southern provinces of Ukraine that was under the Austro-Hungarian Empire rule at the time. And he said, I'll get them out for you. You pay me $5 a head for families to come out, and we'll charge them give them 160 acres for $10.
Everybody got paid. The federal government ended up only having to pay $5 for these immigrants because they got the $10 back from the land.
And really, I mean, these people treated Dr. Olescu like he was Moses. They thought that they had died and gone to heaven. They were going to get out of the starvation situation that they were in and be able to have freedom and acquire their own land and homestead. That's what they wanted to do. They were farmers and very good at it.
So they arrive in Canada on the train, and what's their introduction to this wonderful Canadian land?
It was desolate. It was dreary. They were literally left out at the corner of their 160 acres. 160 acres with a shovel and pick, few their belongings, and said, good luck.
Because
Wish you well.
Winter's
coming, so you better get busy and start clearing your land. And they literally had to dig down deep to dig a hole for themselves to live before winter came and before they froze to death.
So that was why they had sod-roofed houses and pit houses, because that was really, I mean, there's not a lot of trees in the prairie to make a log house, so you just dig it into the ground and cover the roof with the sod.
They did have some timber, but to begin with, they didn't have the time. Time was of the essence. It was easier to dig into the side of the hills to acquire their first home and accommodation.
And maybe a lot of rocks around.
And a lot of rocks, especially in the Alberta area, a lot of rocky areas.
Yeah. From 1891 to
Yes.
1914, you say 171,000 Ukrainians came to Canada. Now, in 1914, the war breaks out between the Allies, the Axis powers, and the Allies, and Germany is the enemy. How does that involve Ukrainians in any way?
Unfortunately, the Ukrainians were caught in a catch-22 situation because when they immigrated to Canada, they had to obtain an Austrian passport before leaving their country, their homeland.
The good doctor had arranged it, so get an Austrian passport.
That's right. Little did they know that 10, 20, or even a few years down the road, when possibly some of them were already naturalized, that it was going to be a problem, a severe problem for them.
Because if you were holding an Austrian passport, you were an enemy alien in the eyes of the Canadian government.
The War Measures Act.
That was defining it.
That was defining it.
Apparently, even though the Canadian government was told that these people are not enemy aliens, they're friendly aliens.
The British government informed them that they are friendly aliens.
But we
and treat them with due respect.
Well, why did we, do you know why our government decided to treat you as enemy aliens? Was it just easier, or why?
I think there was a lot of miscommunication because of the language barrier. A lot of people couldn't explain themselves to the proper authorities about what their ethnic origin was.
Yeah.
And all they had was to show them was their passport. It said Austrian.
And they were the bad guys.
And that was it.
Okay. The establishment of these internment camps began right then, 1914, and we're going to talk about that because several of those camps involved the Okanagan good and proper. We'll do that when we come back from this break. Welcome back to Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts with Andrea Malish talking about the incarceration, the internment of Ukrainian Canadians, and we're going to get to the Vernon internment camp in just a little while. War breaks out in 1914, First World War. You've got 171,000 Ukrainian Canadians in this country, but most of them are involved in farming and creating the grain for Canada to eat. So you don't want to throw all of them in jail. About how many are we talking about here?
We're talking about 80,000 that actually reported and acknowledged a requirement that they had to report to the local authorities that they did indeed hold Austrian passports and report on a monthly basis. And on top of that, they wanted some change, $2 a month. They wanted to get their book stamped so they knew where they were, what they were doing, that they're feeding their country. And
so the farmers, these Ukrainian farmers, Canadian farmers,
yes,
had to pay the government $2 a month.
A month for 6 years. We're talking over 80,000 people that actually, came forth and admitted that they had an Austrian passport.
Well, where do you come up with $2 a month, $24 a year if you're a Canadian Ukrainian farmer? I mean, they couldn't have that much money on them. Really?
I think the issues became quite a struggle for a lot of people, and I think tempers flew, and people were incarcerated if they didn't pay up. They didn't have a lot of choice. They had to come up with the money somehow, or else it'd be either taking their family with them in prison or leaving their family behind and going themselves.
So that's 80,000 were identified. About 80,000 just sort of disappeared into the woodwork. How did they manage that?
A lot of them just chose not to report that they were indeed an Austrian passport holder, changed their names.
A lot of Smiths suddenly
cropped up. A lot of Smiths cropped up. A number of them, 10,000 of them, chose to fight in the war for Canada. They had to change their names. They had to change their place of birth and possibly became Russians.
Did they just write that? I don't have any papers, I'm from Russia.
I'd imagine so, because 10,000 fought in the war for Canada, and we have one in particular, Conowal, who was a Victoria Cross winner.
Okay, so we got 80,000 paying the government out of meager supplies, 80,000 disappear, 10,000 fight in the war. How many end up in internment camps?
Approximately 5,500 actually were interned.
Now, how many camps across the country are we talking about
We're
here?
talking 24 camps. Specifically in BC, there were 7.
Vernon being one of them?
Vernon being the largest camp, the longest lived camp, longest run camp, and it was the central camp for British Columbia. And it was the first class camp, and what was also unique is that it housed women and children.
It was a family camp?
It was a family camp. There's 2 family camps in Canada. The other one was Spirit Lake, Quebec, but that housed second-class prisoners and families. Vernon's was specifically a first-class camp, quite unique.
Now, how did they identify first class? Was it an educational component or a country of origin? How did they figure that out?
Major General Sir William Otter was brought out of retirement to be head of the internment operations. He made the decision of who was going to be the first-class prisoners and who was going to be second-class prisoners. And he chose to not just go by officer status, but I think there was some discrimination there, and if there was someone of social status, professional status, they were declared first-class prisoners.
So when the Vernon camp was opened, there were what, about 300? How many
324
inmates?
in Vernon's camp.
And not all of those would be Ukrainian. Some of them would be German nationals who'd been moved out of Vancouver. Because
that camp was specifically a first-class camp, majority of them in that camp were German and German families from the aristocratic elitist group of Vancouver that were brought here. And a small percentage was Ukrainians that were housed there in the second-class section of the camp. So obviously there was rival factions that would come up in those situations of having those 2 classes in one camp. And then because Vernon's camp was the central camp of British Columbia, a lot of Ukrainians were siphoned through Vernon's camp onto the working class camps, which then moved on to, Mirror Lake, Edgewood. They're road builders working on the telegraph lines, and were forced to work, which was actually against the Hague Convention.
They said that civilians in wartime cannot be made to do certain things.
That's right.
They were made to...
They could volunteer, and they could be paid. And it could be three things: is the first-class prisoners had to make sure that they looked after themselves. They weren't forced to work. The second one is they had an option to work for the government, but they were to be paid. And the third one is they could work for private corporations, but again, they were to be paid. The second-class prisoners, the Ukrainians, were forced to work. There was no options. And in the end, they still did not receive their money.
Even though they were, it was agreed that they would be paid what, 50 cents a day or what?
Anywhere between 12.5 cents a day to 25 cents a day, when prior to war, they were used to, for those type of jobs, getting paid $2.50 up to $3.50.
A day?
A day.
To do the job.
To do the job.
So, we've got the Vernon Camp established. Where is the Vernon Camp built, or what is adapted to become the Vernon Camp?
The Vernon Camp was 10 acres. It was the BC Jail, provincial jailhouse, originally built. It was a brick building, 13 rooms, 2 baths. It was turned into the Vernon Asylum. It was a division of the provincial health department for the mentally ill. And then prior to war, then it was changed over to an internment camp.
And there's a lot of conversation about whether we call it an internment camp or a concentration camp, and of course the connotation of concentration camp is certainly identified with our World War II history, but it was a concentration camp. That was the nature of it, that it concentrated enemy aliens in this location.
The name of the operations was the internment operations, but indeed those were 24 concentration camps across Canada. It was not a pretty sight. We cannot compare it to World War II concentration camps, but clearly the government had called them concentration camps at that time.
I mean, there's a floral emblem in flowers, concentration on the floral emblem.
At the gates of Vernon Camp, picture 1916, Vernon concentration camp. That was the terminology they used then. We cannot diminish the effect that this lifestyle had on people in that camp or any other camps there. Many lives were lost in camp life.
170 lives were lost, apparently, according to the statistics.
There were a number of deaths in there from illnesses, from other activities, people being shot, or people were tortured. And there's a great number, 106 as a matter of fact, that were had gone insane.
As a result of their incarceration.
As a result of being incarcerated behind the barbed wire fence.
There has just been a display at the Vernon Museum called the Barbed Wire Solution. These are barbed wire fences all around this area. And what are people living inside that compound?
They're living in, the first-class prisoners, specifically in Vernon, were living in 14 by 16 black tar paper shacks. And they had neat little gardens of their own that they were able to keep and grow their own vegetables. And, but of course, wintertime came, it became pretty bare and desolate and very cold. In the second-class camp, there were barracks. And then as you move on to camps, Edgewood, Mirror Lake, they lived in tents, bunk houses. They lived in very cold and desolate conditions out there, and they suffered immeasurably.
Apparently the worst camp was Banff. I mean, that was
Right.
the hideous work of building a road to nowhere. I mean, nothing positive was accomplished, and it was a barren existence.
Well, they did a lot of road work, a lot of building of the Banff National Park, golf course, tennis courts, and area, but they were treated very poorly. They lived in very discomfort accommodations, and they suffered. They were tortured. Life was not easy at Castle Mountain. Life was not easy at any of the camps. So we have the other, where Spirit Lake, that housed second-class families.
That's in Quebec.
And children died. Minus 60-degree weather, middle of winter. These families could not survive on what the government allowed them to have.
Okay, going to take a break here, come back in just a second, because the wonderful thing about human beings is that they flourish, it seems, no matter where they are. We're going to continue our discussion of the Vernon concentration camp for Ukrainian Canadians right after this break. Welcome back to Okanagan Pioneers and Places. Mike Roberts talking with Andrea Malish, the president of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, as a matter of fact, and a person very interested in the story of the internment of about 5,500 Ukrainian Canadians in internment camps during the First World War. The story of Vernon's camp, 324 people in there, and of that number, about how many were Ukrainians in the Vernon camp?
Approximately 67 were of Ukrainian descent. But majority of the Ukrainians weren't in Vernon camp. They were moved on to the working class camps, Edgewood, Mirror Lake, Revelstoke, Field, Nanaimo. They had work for them to do. They didn't want to pay them very much money. Yeah. And the government and private corporations could make use of cheap labor.
Exactly.
And they forced them to work.
They were given basically a contract to build the road, and then at the end of it, they didn't end up paying the people at all anyway.
No.
I mean, even though they might have had an account built up of all of this work that they'd done and expecting 12.5 to 25 cents at the end of internment in 1920, nothing.
Well, the terrible part about it is specifically an incident arose at Edgewood Camp in 1916, and 110 of them went on strike because the accommodations were unbearable and the living conditions were unbearable, and they also complained about the wages that they were getting paid. The situation got looked into. These people were, rations were cut, and of course the ringleaders were thrown in solitary confinement until Ridgway went out to check out the situation and realized that these men were peaceful, they were pleasant, they were quiet, and they had legitimate concerns. After all that, they actually took the 20 ringleaders out of the camp, switched them with guys from Vernon. So they swapped places, put them back to work thinking the situation would be alleviated, yeah. And it wasn't.
It was still a rotten place to be.
It was still a terrible situation to be. These gentlemen were working on these roads that were going nowhere. And in desolate situation, of course, they were ready to strike again, and that camp was shut down.
Now, this must have had quite the effect in the local papers. I mean, what are the headlines in the local papers as these enemy aliens? Because I guess population still looked on the people that are interned in these camps as enemy, right?
They did.
So the headlines read, you know, uprisings, enemy aliens causing trouble.
A lot of the interesting articles in the local paper were more so about the camp lifestyle in Vernon specifically, because that camp housed the first-class prisoners, which were the actual prisoners of war, the German elitists. They had money. They were able to spend their deposits of money. They were supposed to only be spending $5 a month of their profits that was held in trust for them. These guys were spending $500 at a shot on clothing, caviar, candy, teas. They hired a housekeeper and a cook for them. So they had a pretty nice lifestyle in comparison to the second-class prisoners. A lot of recreation going on there. A lot of lawful activities, tennis.
I see hockey teams?
Yeah, hockey teams and gymnastics and wrestling and movies and such. But
some illegal activities as well.
And some illegal activities.
What did they find when they tore the camp down after 1920?
They found a number of stills that they tried to find while the camp was in operation, and a few tunnels as well, because we did have one incident where 12 of them did escape through under the fence, through to the neighbor's house, behind his bread box in the kitchen, and 12 of them got away.
There were a single murder, at least, reported from these camps?
There was a supposed murder in the camp. There was a fight between two young boys in that camp. The two fathers got involved, and one father headbutted the other one and broke his own neck, but it still went to civil powers for trial, and it was acquitted.
The other guy in the fight?
The other guy was acquitted, and The fellow actually on his deathbed had made a statement that he did not hold the fellow responsible for his death, for his injuries.
Now, the fact that these people were held to 1920 is an amazing thing anyway, because the First World War ended in 1918, but again they were screwed by the fact that they had sort of Russian associations, and when the Bolshevik Revolution took place, they figured that they should still keep them in internment camps.
There is a bit of conflict going on there, for sure, in 1917 with the revolution happening. All of a sudden, these guys who were supposedly enemy aliens because they were Austrian passport holders were now considered Bolsheviks, and and a lot of them were disenfranchised. But then you have the other side of the coin where these guys were still working for cheap labor. There was still work to be done out there. Private corporations were making money off these guys, so was the Canadian government. And if they could squeeze another 16 months of work out of them, why not? Why not?
Now, the current government of the day, 1999, has said there is a wrong to be righted. How do you want that wrong to be righted, of the internment of innocent Canadian Ukrainians in the World War I?
We would like them to acknowledge that this has happened. A lot of records were destroyed in the 50s and 60s from the National Archives, but they've already redressed the situation with World War II, with the internment of the Japanese. Why not put this into our history books as well? And we would like to see some of this money, the $31,000 that was originally still held in trust, and properties and securities on top of that, and interest, used for further studies of the Ukrainian Canadians of Canada. This should be in our history books.
Andrea Malish, I thank you for bringing the story to Okanagan Pioneers and Places.
Thank you very much.
Andrea Malish is the president of the Ukrainian Canadian Congress Vernon Branch. Our story's been the internment camps and specifically the internment camp in Vernon.